Hey guys, thank you very much for being here tonight. Imagine lying under a vast prehistoric sky. No streetlights, no hum of cities, just the slow pulse of fireflies drifting through the grass. Somewhere nearby, a small group of early humans, huddled together for warmth. They can hear the soft breathing of their companions, the distant roar of a lion, and the rustle of wind through dry trees. But there's one thing missing: words. Trust me, if you lived back then, you wouldn't even dare to open your mouth. A single sound could draw the attention of something with much sharper teeth than curiosity. Before we begin, a little favor: tap subscribe and give us a thumbs up to help our bedtime story family grow. Now snuggle in and let tonight's story guide you softly into a night full of calm and beautiful dreams. If your mind feels crowded tonight with worries, with noise, with unfinished thoughts, share them in the comments. Tell us how you feel right now, what's keeping you awake, or what you're hoping to find in your dreams. We'll read them, and maybe someone out there will whisper back with kindness. As you lie there, let your mind grow soft and open, ready to wander through this gentle story until sleep finds you. Long before words shaped the world, silence ruled everything. The world of prehistoric humans was loud, filled with roaring rivers, crashing storms, and stampeding beasts. Yet their own communication was little more than grunts, groans, and stares. Imagine trying to warn your friend about a lurking saber-toothed cat using only your eyebrows. That was life. Every feeling from hunger to affection had to pass through the language of motion. These early human species, like Australopithecus afarensis or Homo habilis, weren't mute by choice. They simply hadn't developed the physical or neural control needed for speech. Their tongues were thick and clumsy, their throats high in the neck, their brains small. Scientists are still debating whether they could produce distinct vowels or if their sounds were more like a mix of bark and hum. Whatever they were, they worked well enough to shout danger or mine, but not to sing a lullaby. They had to rely on gesture. The lift of a hand, the tilt of the head, the direction of a stare. A raised palm could stop someone mid-step. A finger to the lips could mean quiet. In some ways, their world wasn't entirely different from that of modern apes. Even today, chimpanzees use over 60 distinct gestures to communicate, meaning everything from groom me to back off. Our ancestors likely built from that same gestural foundation. But unlike chimps, early humans had something else: curiosity. They watched nature closely. They listened when a bird gave a warning call, when wolves howled, when rain hissed against leaves. Those sounds etched themselves into memory. It's easy to picture a young hominin imitating a bird's chirp, laughing in delight when another echoed it back. The first conversation, if you can call it that, might have been just that: a silly exchange of imitation under a hot African sun. Still, life without words was perilous. Cooperation was everything. To hunt mammoths or share water groups needed coordination. A single misunderstood grunt could mean starvation. And misunderstandings likely happened often. Perhaps one day 2 individuals saw a predator in the distance. One pointed the other, thought it meant come here. You can imagine how that ended. Miscommunication was not only frustrating, it was dangerous. Some researchers suggest that in these early days, emotional tone did most of the talking. A soft hum soothed, a sharp cry alarmed. In fact, modern babies still use tone before words, the prehistoric echo of our earliest ancestors. Even laughter, one of humanity's oldest instincts, predates true language. Anthropologists think laughter may have emerged as a social glue long before structured speech. So when you chuckle at a meme or laugh nervously during a meeting, you're actually doing something ancient. But how did they think? Could someone without words truly imagine or plan? That's one of the deepest mysteries in anthropology. Some scholars argue that thought itself depends on language, that before words humans lived only in the present. Others disagree, saying they thought in images, sensations, and memories. Maybe it's both. Maybe they dreamed in sound and shadow, their minds alive with pictures but silent as the moon. And what a moon they saw, clear, untouched, enormous. Nights must have been full of whispers, the crack of twigs, the call of distant hyenas, the sigh of wind in grass. Each sound was a message. Each silence was a choice. Imagine lying beside your clan, feeling your heartbeat match the rhythm of crickets. You sense someone beside you shifting, turning, maybe humming lowly to say, "I'm here." That tiny vibration of sound, barely a murmur, might have been the seed of everything that followed. Over generations, these murmurs became more deliberate. Slowly, the muscles of the mouth and throat grew stronger, more flexible. Babies that could babble more expressively, probably bonded better, survived longer. Evolution favored the chatty ones, ironic considering how much we now pay to keep phones silent. So in those early centuries, before language had rules or poetry, humans began tuning their voices like new instruments. The silence of their ancestors cracked open, just a little like dawn breaking over a still plain. Somewhere between a grunt and a sigh, the first intention shimmered into sound. Not yet a word, but no longer just noise. The world had been quiet for millions of years, but now for the first time, humanity's breath itself began to carry meaning. And that, in its fragile beginning, was the birth of something unstoppable. The sun rises over the endless savanna, painting the horizon with orange fire. The air hums with insects, and in the distance the silhouettes of early humans move through tall grass. Their bodies lean, their movements cautious, yet purposeful. They're not quite us yet, brow ridges, heavy jaws, powerful brains smaller. But inside a new spark is forming. They live in a dangerous paradise. Lions prowl the edges, crocodiles lurk in the shallows, and hunger never stays away for long. Every day is a test of awareness and cooperation. One wrong move and you're lunch. That's why sound begins to matter more than ever. At first, it's instinctive sharp cries for warning, low hums for calm. But as their world grows louder, their voices follow suit. Scientists still debate whether the first steps toward human speech began with fear or curiosity. Was it the need to warn others run, or to share excitement food? Either way, those earliest noises changed survival odds. Groups that could coordinate even slightly better gained a crucial advantage. Imagine a young Homo erectus hearing a leopard's cough in the dark. She lifts her head and emits a harsh car sound, perhaps a sound her clan has learned means predator. Others freeze, understanding instantly. No grammar, no syntax. But meaning has arrived. Archaeologists studying early campsites have found patterns that hint at growing social complexity: fire pits, surrounded by stones, tool-making areas, places where bones were cracked for marrow. These sites suggest coordination, shared intention, and likely shared sound. Around these fires, language began as a survival tool, but it carried something deeper: connection. And connection in any form changes the brain. Over generations, natural selection favored those who could produce and interpret vocal sounds more efficiently. Slowly, neural wiring specialized for rhythm, tone, and repetition. We don't usually think of rhythm as a brain function, but it's the secret heartbeat of language. The same pulse that drives drumming, dancing, and speech was already forming deep inside those prehistoric minds. If you could stand beside them, you'd see tiny miracles, one hunter calling to another with a low whistle, a mother humming to soothe a restless child, a friend imitating the croak of a frog just to make someone laugh. Every small sound, however crude, built a bridge. It wasn't just practical. It was emotional. A gentle hum meant, "I'm near." A soft click meant, "Come here." And soon those sounds weren't limited to immediate needs. They became tools for affection and belonging. Evolution doesn't just reward survival, it rewards comfort. Groups that felt connected worked together more easily, shared food, and protected each other. Interestingly, scientists studying modern hunter-gatherers have noticed something similar. Tribes that use more vocal variation, more musicality in speech, tend to have stronger emotional bonds. Some linguists even suggest that language may have evolved from singing rather than talking. The theory goes like this: before structured speech, humans sang their emotions in melodic tones the way whales communicate across oceans. Now imagine that. The African plains dusk, settling in fire, crackling softly. Instead of words, soft melodic murmurs rise from the group, part hum, part sigh, part heartbeat. It must have been hauntingly beautiful, like the earth itself learning to whisper. Of course, there were limits. Without syntax or abstract terms, misunderstandings were common. Maybe one sound meant, "Come here on Monday, but stay back on Tuesday," depending on context. You'd have to be half detective, half mind reader. And yet, over time, these uncertain beginnings became more refined. Somewhere along the line, they began associating specific sounds with recurring things: water, fire, sky, danger, fruit. This is the foundation of all vocabulary pattern recognition. The human brain loves patterns. It can't resist turning repetition into meaning. You've seen this instinct if you've ever looked at clouds and found shapes, faces, animals, symbols. Our ancestors were doing the same, but with sound. One quirky tidbit: some anthropologists believe certain sounds felt right for certain meanings even before words existed. High-pitched vowels like ee and I seem to match smallness or nearness, while deep oo sounds suggest distance or largeness. It's called sound symbolism, and it still affects modern languages. Think of tiny versus huge. The words sound like their meanings. Maybe those ancient humans weren't just babbling. They were tuning the emotional notes of reality. There's another debate that still splits scholars today. Did language evolve once in a single population, spreading outward? Or did it emerge independently in different human groups? The single origin theory says one lucky group developed vocal control first, and their descendants carried it everywhere. The multi-origin view imagines language popping up like sparks in several places at once, shaped by local needs and culture. Whichever is true, one thing is certain: by the time early Homo erectus walked out of Africa, their voices had become as vital as their tools. Language, or the shadow of it, had begun. Picture the world now growing quiet at dusk. A clan gathers by a riverbank. A father gestures toward the fading sun and murmurs a short rhythmic sound, something that feels like day end. His daughter repeats it. The others nod. A pattern is born. 1,000 generations later, that faint utterance will echo through the word evening. No one recorded the moment language begins. It isn't a single spark, but a slow sunrise. Yet somewhere between the rustle of the grass and the beat of their hearts, early humans took their first steps toward speech and unknowingly toward civilization itself. Night falls again on the open plains, but this time the darkness flickers with something new fire. Flames hiss and snap, casting a golden glow across faces that have seen too many storms, too many hunts, and too much silence. This is where everything changes. Around these fires, sound begins to find rhythm, meaning, and memory. Fire isn't just light or warmth. It's a teacher. It draws people together, forces them to stay close, to sit still, to listen. Before fire, the world was ruled by movement, walking, hunting, hiding, surviving. But now, in this circle of light, there is time to pause. And when people pause, they talk, or at least they try. Scientists believe that firelight gatherings may have been the birthplace of storytelling long before proper words. The hypnotic dance of flame, the faces glowing red and gold, the crackle that fills the air, all of it invites imagination. One person gestures, mimics an animal, lets out a sequence of clicks and hums to describe the hunt. Another joins in repeating the rhythm. They laugh, clap, sway. What begins as imitation becomes ritual. This isn't random noise anymore. It's shared music. The first proto-speech structured sound meant to carry shared meaning. Anthropologists call this holophrastic communication's single utterances, standing for whole ideas. A single ha might mean danger over there. A wa could mean come back. Primitive, yes, but astonishingly effective. Imagine the warmth of that first conversation. A hunter returns pantomiming the chase, exaggerating with grunts and gestures. The others respond sounds bouncing around like sparks. They reenact the story rhythmically, almost like a dance. There's laughter, surprise, and even suspense. Without knowing it, they're rehearsing the future art of language, tone, timing, and turn-taking. Scientists are still debating whether this kind of proto-speech came before or after tool-making intelligence, but the timing is intriguing. Around the same age as early fire sites, we find evidence of sophisticated stone tools. Achillean hand axes carved by Homo erectus. It's no coincidence. To make a symmetrical tool, you must plan, imagine, and teach. And teaching requires communication. Fire and flint were partners in language's birth. Let's pause for a playful thought. Imagine one of these early humans trying to instruct another how to shape a stone axe using only grunts. Meaning hit it harder. Meaning not like that, you fool. If you've ever tried helping someone assemble furniture without speaking the same language, congratulations, you've reenacted a prehistoric moment. Around the fire, sounds evolve. Some are copied from nature, a sharp hiss for a snake, a hoo-hoo for an owl. Others are human-made, entirely sculpted by lips, tongue, and breath. Slowly, the range expands. A hum becomes a tone becomes a call becomes a word-like sound. This was the dawn of phonetics, though no one could have named it yet. And the fire itself played another role. Light reshaped the human brain. It allowed social gatherings at night, strengthening memory, empathy, and cooperation. Neuroscientists have found that warm firelight triggers a calming rhythm in our alpha brain waves, the same state that encourages storytelling and imagination. Sitting by a fire tonight, you might feel your mind grow softer, slower, dreamier. That's not just relaxation. It's the echo of what language evolved to do, connect minds through calm and rhythm. Let's not forget, smell and taste, the forgotten companions of speech. Sharing roasted meat or roots around the fire meant sharing scent, chewing sounds, satisfaction. One quirky theory even suggests that eating cooked food changed the structure of the human jaw, freeing space for more precise tongue movement. In other words, fire didn't just spark conversation, it physically shaped our ability to speak. And then there's rhythm, that subtle heartbeat-like cadence that makes language flow. As groups sat together, the sound of crackling wood, the pattern of breath, the occasional burst of laughter all blended into rhythm. Perhaps one person began tapping a stick or slapping a knee to emphasize the sound the first beat. From there, chants might have formed. Imagine a scene thousands of years ago, a semicircle of men and women children at their feet, their faces flickering in orange light. One begins to hum. The hum turns into a sequence of tones. Others join in, their voices low and uncertain at first, then stronger. The chant becomes a game, a bond. It may not have words, but it has meaning. We are here together. Modern linguists call this the musical proto-language hypothesis, the idea that melody came before syntax. Speech in this view grew out of music. Our ancestors sang before they spoke. And it makes sense. Even today, when you talk to a baby, your voice naturally becomes sing-song, exaggerated pitch, gentle rhythm. That isn't new. That's ancient memory resurfacing in every lullaby. Not all scholars agree. Some believe language began not from music, but from the sharp emotional cries of warning and pain. Speech, they argue, grew from screams. That's the thing about studying prehistory. We have fossils of bones, but not of sound. The truth lies somewhere in between. Maybe the first song was a warning call that turned into comfort. After all, fear and love both make us shout. As the fire burns lower, the group begins to drowse. Embers glow, breath slows, and faint murmurs drift through the night. One person hums softly, the same rhythm repeated, perhaps meaning nothing, perhaps everything. A baby stirs, sighs, and falls asleep to that ancient lullaby. Language isn't born in a day. It's born in countless nights like this one, where fear fades, comfort grows, and sound becomes more than survival. It becomes belonging. And tomorrow, when dawn breaks and smoke rises from cooling ashes, someone will mimic that sound again, and another will understand. Morning breaks over the plains, golden light rippling through the grass like a living ocean. A mother stirs near the remains of the fire, her arms curled protectively around a small bundle, her child. The little one opens its mouth and lets out a soft cooing sound somewhere between a sigh and a song. The mother responds instinctively, making a rhythmic hum swaying slightly. It's not speech yet, but it's more than noise. It's emotion wrapped in sound. This moment, a mother soothing her child, might have been one of the earliest roots of human language. Scientists call it motherese, or infant-directed speech. The gentle sing-song tone adults use with babies even today. The funny part, it's universal. No matter the culture or the time, humans automatically exaggerate pitch and melody when talking to infants. Even hunter-gatherer mothers who've never heard modern lullabies use the same rise and fall of tone, the same soothing repetition. So imagine this prehistoric mother's world danger lurking beyond the camp, yet here in her arms peace. She hums to her baby, her voice soft and rhythmic. The baby quiets. Something profound happens, communication built not on survival, but on comfort. That's the birth of emotional language. It's easy to imagine how such moments shaped evolution. Babies who responded to sound had better chances of survival. Mothers who used gentle melodic tones formed stronger bonds. Over countless generations, the human ear and brain became tuned not just to noise, but to meaningful sound tone pitch rhythm. One fascinating scientific tidbit research on the FOXP2 gene, sometimes nicknamed the language gene, shows that it's essential for vocal learning. Humans have a unique version of it, slightly different from that of chimpanzees. Interestingly, songbirds also rely on FOXP2 for learning songs. Coincidence? Probably not. The same neural circuits that helped birds memorize tunes may have helped early humans learn to modulate their voices, a genetic prelude to conversation. So long before anyone said hello, language was already living inside lullabies. Mothers passed knowledge not through words but through rhythm. The same rhythm later guided speech and storytelling. Let's linger with that mother for a moment. The sun rises higher. The air warms. She steps outside her shelter, a simple lean-to of branches and hide. Around her, others are waking. One woman stretches, another tends to embers. The baby coos again, this time louder, more playful. A nearby man chuckles, mimicking the sound. The baby laughs, and there it is, a shared moment, a micro-conversation. One sound passed between hearts carrying joy. Humor, empathy, bonding. These didn't wait for civilization. They began here with primitive syllables and laughter. And laughter, in fact, might be one of humanity's oldest languages. Anthropologists note that chimpanzees and even rats laugh high-pitched panting sounds when playing or tickled. For humans, laughter evolved not just as amusement, but as social glue. It meant safety, trust, and belonging. Around those ancient fires, laughter probably meant we're okay tonight. Scientists are still debating whether spoken language first appeared in the context of care like a mother's hum, or danger like warning calls. Both sides make sense. But the mother tongue theory has a poetic edge. The first words didn't come from fear, but from love. Now imagine how sound slowly became structure. Mothers repeated familiar tones to calm their babies. Over time, those tones became consistent. The same syllable over and over might have meant food safe or sleep. The repetition carved memory, and memory shaped pattern. Soon, everyone began recognizing sounds by association. One quirky idea, proposed by linguist Dean Falk, suggests that baby talk itself drove the evolution of speech. As early humans' brains grew, babies were born earlier, smaller, more helpless, to fit through their mothers' narrow pelvises. That meant longer periods of parental care. To keep infants calm and close, mothers developed musical vocalizations, the ancestors of words. So in a roundabout way, language might owe its existence to the chaos of childbirth. You can picture this evolutionary feedback loop. Babies coo, mothers sing, both brains adapt, words slowly form. It's strange to think that our ability to debate philosophy or write poetry might trace back to a lullaby. But it's a lovely thought, isn't it? As the day goes on, this small prehistoric band begins to move. They gather tools, check the horizon, scan for water and shade. Communication grows more layered. Simple sounds become symbols, Might signal stop, while sure could mean go. A few sounds turn into a code. They still rely heavily on gesture, but now sound starts to fill the gaps. At the edge of their camp, the same mother calls to her child, a melodic ma. The sound is affectionate, protective. Generations later, that syllable will echo across languages, mama, madre, mother, mima. No matter the language, that syllable carries the same warmth. Coincidence? Hardly. It's evolution whispering through time. Scientists who study cross-linguistic patterns find that words for mother and father across thousands of languages tend to use similar sounds, MNPB. These are among the easiest sounds a baby can make, formed with lips and breath. They're also among the first every child utters. Humanity's most ancient words are quite literally baby talk. By the time dusk returns, the group settles once more around a flickering fire. The mother hums again, the same soft pattern as the night before. This time others join her. Their voices blend, rising and falling, carrying not just comfort, but meaning. Maybe the melody now means home. Maybe it means sleep. Under that sky filled with the sigh of wind and the distant roar of animals, something profound unfolds. Words aren't just forming, they're being felt. And that more than anything is the birth of true language. As the days stretch on and generations pass, communication deepens. But there's a mystery that keeps modern scientists awake at night. Not how humans learned to speak, but how they decided what to use. Did the first languages begin with hand gestures or with vocal sounds? The debate still rages thousands of years after the first words were ever whispered. Picture it, two early humans walking side by side through tall, whispering grass. One points to the sky, squints, and raises an arm in warning. A flock of vultures circles above a sign of death nearby. No words, no sounds, just gestures. The other understands immediately. Gesture was their first alphabet. For millions of years before language, our ancestors had bodies that spoke fluently. Chimps, bonobos, and gorillas do this today, slapping the ground, raising hands, showing teeth, puffing chests. A single gesture can mean come go or don't mess with me. Humans inherited that skill and refined it. Anthropologists call it the gesture-first hypothesis, the idea that language began in the hands, not the mouth. But not everyone agrees. Some researchers insist it started with vocal calls, the vocal theory shaped by emotional cries that became deliberate. After all, sound travels farther than sight. You can shout across a forest, but a wave of your hand is useless in the dark. So which came first, the hand or the tongue? Scientists are still debating whether early humans combined gesture and sound simultaneously. One theory suggests that both systems evolved together, gestures for precision, sounds for emotion. Think of it like ancient karaoke. The hands tell one part of the story, the voice another. Now imagine a late afternoon thousands of years ago. The air smells of dust and rain. A small group walks along a riverbank, their bare feet pressing soft mud. One young man spots movement in the grass, something dangerous. He stops, raises his arm, hisses softly through his teeth. The group freezes. The combination of gesture and hiss works perfectly. The predator slinks away. That single act, wordless, quick, understood by all, might be one of humanity's earliest examples of syntax. Gesture plus sound equals meaning. This blending of body and voice is still part of us. You can see it every day, someone talking with hands flying, nodding to emphasize words, lowering tone, to convey trust. In a way, we never left the Stone Age. We just added better vocabulary. There's a quirky detail here too. Some anthropologists think gestures help shape grammar itself. The hand's natural rhythm may have influenced the pacing and structure of early phrases. Modern sign languages still reveal how powerfully gesture can express complex ideas, abstract ones too. A person can speak in silence, combining hand shapes and motion into sentences richer than sound alone. But the gesture-first idea has its rivals. Critics point to anatomy. Fossil evidence shows that by the time Homo erectus walked the earth nearly 2 million years ago, our ancestors already had descended larynxes and flexible tongues. The body was preparing for speech long before writing was even a thought. That suggests that sound, not gesture, was the main frontier. Some scientists even argue that speech was favored because it allowed communication without sight. You could speak in the dark while hunting or hiding. Gestures, on the other hand, required visibility. And in prehistoric Africa, when nights were long and predators watched from the shadows, sound meant survival. Still, the hand and the voice were partners. You can imagine early humans around a fire, one person gesturing wildly as they grunt, another mimicking both sound and motion. Laughter ripples through the group. They're inventing dual-channel communication, physical and vocal. A modern echo of this still exists in Italy's animated speech, Japan's bowing and tonal respect words, or the rhythmic chants of Pacific Islanders. Everywhere, the fusion of movement and voice carries deeper meaning than either could alone. And perhaps that's why humans out of all species became storytellers. Gesture made our speech visible. Sound made it emotional. Together, they formed a universal code. One famous discovery gives us a hint about how physical communication evolved. In the caves of Spain, archaeologists found 40,000-year-old handprints, dozens of them pressed with red pigment onto stone walls. Some are small, others large, some with missing fingers. Were they signatures, rituals, messages? We may never know. But they prove one thing: the human hand wanted to say something long before the mouth could. Let's pause for a thought experiment. You're part of a prehistoric group sitting near a cave entrance. The day is ending, the air cooling. Someone points toward the sky, the first stars appear. You copy the gesture. Then you both hum softly, perhaps mimicking the sound of night insects. That combination, gesture plus tone, forms a shared meaning. You've just named the stars, not with a word, but with a movement and a melody. It's oddly beautiful, isn't it? Before language was logic, it was art. The human instinct to express came before the need to explain. Scholars still debate which path came first, but what's certain is that these early humans were already blurring the lines between gesture and sound. Each reinforced the other, and in doing so, they set the stage for the true miracle to come: spoken language. And as the firelight flickers and shadows dance across stone walls, you can almost hear it, a soft hum, a hand sweep through the air. The world's first duet between voice and movement. Over time, humanity's throat, tongue, and brain began to change in ways invisible yet monumental. Evolution was quietly sculpting the machinery of speech. Long before anyone uttered a sentence, anatomy was rehearsing for it. The human voice box, the larynx, started to descend lower in the throat, giving our species a wider range of pitch and resonance. It's one of the key differences that separate us from apes, whose high-positioned larynx keeps them from producing distinct vowels. Imagine that transformation not as a single leap, but as a million-year whisper. One small change, then another, generation after generation, shaping the body to match the growing need for communication. It's as if nature herself knew we'd one day want to sing lullabies, tell jokes, and whisper secrets in the dark. The tongue followed suit, shortening, flattening, becoming a master of subtle control. The lips gained flexibility, the jaw refined its movement, and the nasal passages expanded to modulate breath. Each tiny mutation opened new acoustic possibilities. If you've ever rolled your R's or whistled a tune, you've performed miracles of anatomy that our early ancestors were just beginning to explore. But the greatest transformation of all was internal. Deep in the brain, the regions that control movement and sound began to cooperate. Broca's area, now known as the Center for Speech Production, became more sophisticated. Wernicke's area, which processes meaning, expanded too. These two regions formed a loop, a kind of neurological highway connecting understanding and expression. Scientists still debate exactly when this brain architecture appeared. Some think it began with Homo erectus, others with Homo heidelbergensis, or even later with Homo sapiens. Either way, the change was profound. For the first time, humans could not only make sounds, they could plan them. Picture an early human standing on a rocky hilltop at dusk. Below him, the rest of his band gathers sorting tools and dividing food. He sees a herd of animals moving in the distance. His mind races, he wants to alert the others, but how he exhales sharply, forming a rough syllable that mimics the animal's sound. It's not perfect, but it's intentional. The group looks up. They understand. The bridge between thought and sound has been crossed. The funny part, that bridge still develops in every one of us today. Watch a baby learning to talk, the endless babbling. Experimenting with pitch and volume, forming nonsense syllables that sound like tiny songs. It's not random. It's the modern echo of humanity's ancient rehearsal. Each baby in its own way retraces the birth of speech. A quirky detail: linguists have discovered that many basic human sounds like ba-da and ma appear across nearly every culture. They're easy to produce, comfortable for the tongue and lips, and deeply ingrained in our vocal evolution. It's why babies everywhere tend to babble mama and dada. Those aren't learned words, they're biological defaults. Sounds that spill naturally from the shape of the human mouth. Meanwhile, evolution was also fine-tuning the ear. After all, speaking is useless if no one can understand you. The bones of the middle ear became more efficient, the cochlea more sensitive to the subtle frequencies of human speech. Humans could now perceive emotional nuances, a threat, a question, a song. It's the reason we can tell when someone's being sarcastic without a single visual cue. That tonal awareness is ancient. It's what kept our ancestors alive when communication meant life or death. And then there's breath. You might not think of breathing as part of language, but it's everything. Controlled breath is what turns raw sound into rhythm. It's what allows a storyteller to pace their words, a singer to sustain a note, a teacher to emphasize a point. Early humans likely discovered this by accident, learning to control breath while blowing on embers or cooling food. Over time, that same control was harnessed for speech. So yes, you could say language began with someone blowing on hot soup. Around the same time, social life was becoming more complex. Larger groups meant more coordination, more cooperation, and more opportunity for miscommunication. Sound became a shortcut. Instead of pointing or pantomiming, you could signal across distance. Ha for danger, ooh for food, ah for surprise. These weren't random. They were proto-words, consistent sounds carrying shared meaning. Scientists are still debating whether this stage marked true language or just advanced mimicry. Was it a step towards syntax or simply noise with context? No one knows for sure. But one fossil clue might hold the answer: the hyoid bone. It's a tiny horseshoe-shaped bone at the base of the tongue, crucial for controlling speech. Fossils of Homo heidelbergensis and Neanderthals show that they had nearly the same hyoid shape as we do today. That means their voices could have been surprisingly human-like, deep, resonant, capable of articulation. So yes, if you met a Neanderthal, they could probably shout at you quite clearly. And let's be honest, they might have good reason to. These anatomical and neurological upgrades turn sound into something more than instinct. Speech became a tool, an art form, a reflection of thought. For the first time, humans could name the world. Naming changes everything. To name something is to own it, remember it, dream it. Somewhere under that vast prehistoric sky, a small group of humans sat near a stream, watching the reflection of the moon ripple on the surface. One of them murmured a sound, maybe la or lu, imitating the glimmer of water. The others repeated it. It stuck. That moment might have been the world's first word for beauty. And from that small beginning, the floodgates opened. The throat, the tongue, the lungs, the mind all aligned for one extraordinary purpose: to turn thought into sound and sound into meaning. The first true human voices rose into the night, trembling, curious, alive. The human voice had now become a tool as powerful as any stone blade. With the gift of sound control and expanding minds, our ancestors began to move from instinctive noise toward deliberate, meaningful exchange. The age of roaring had ended. The age of talking had quietly begun. The world around them demanded it. Life was still a raw struggle, hunting, gathering, protecting, surviving. But as clans grew larger and cooperation became vital, the limits of grunts and gestures began to show. Imagine trying to coordinate a mammoth hunt with nothing but pointing and screaming. It might work once, but when the stakes were survival, clarity was everything. Scientists are still debating whether this need for coordination was the spark that pushed humans to invent structured sound. Was speech born around the hunt or the hearth? The answer, like most things in prehistory, is probably both. Picture a wide plain. The sun is high, shimmering over tall grass. A group of early Homo sapiens crouches low, spears in hand, watching a herd of grazing animals. The leader raises his hand, then lets out a short sound, maybe something like ha. The group freezes. Another sound lower this time, means move forward. Each sound, simple but shared, carries instruction. The hunt succeeds not because of strength, but communication. That's the magic words replacing roars, precision replacing chaos. The same coordination that once relied on instinct now ran on deliberate sound patterns. Over time, those sounds became standardized, the first vocabulary of survival. One fascinating discovery backs this up. Archaeologists studying ancient stone tool sites have found evidence of teaching behavior-skilled toolmakers, showing novices how to shape stone blades. But you can't explain pressure flaking with just gestures. It requires sequential logic, not too hard turn and sharpen here. Experiments show that spoken instruction doubles learning speed compared to silent demonstration. So it's likely that the ability to teach through speech helped language spread faster than any invention before or since. Let's pause for a humorous thought. Imagine an ancient craftsman teaching his apprentice. The poor student chips the wrong edge again and again, and the teacher, out of frustration, blurts something like no or ga. That frustrated shout, repeated and recognized, might have become one of the first true words of reprimand. Humanity's first sentence could have been, "Stop breaking my tools." Still beyond hunting and crafting, language began serving deeper emotional needs. A call of danger became a call of affection. A warning became reassurance. The voice could now carry warmth, humor, and sorrow, the full range of human experience. Anthropologists often point to this stage as the dawn of symbolic thinking, when sounds weren't just practical signals, but representations of concepts. Early humans started naming things even when they weren't present. A sound for water meant not just the stream nearby, but the idea of water itself. That leap abstraction is what truly separated humans from other species. It's amazing to think that something so ordinary today, saying apple without holding one, was once revolutionary. In that moment, humans gained the ability to talk about the past, imagine the future, and share what didn't yet exist. The entire universe of storytelling, art, and religion sprouted from that single ability to talk about what wasn't in front of them. There's a quirky tidbit from modern research that supports this when anthropologists study hunter-gatherer groups. Today, they find that only a small portion of daily speech is about immediate survival. Most of it, 60 to 70%, is about social life, who did what, who's trustworthy, who made a fool of themselves yesterday. In short, gossip. It seems that once humans could speak, they never stopped. Scientists are still debating whether early vocalizations had recognizable words, or whether they were long streams of melodic sound like birdsong. One camp suggests proto-words, short, repeatable syllables tied to specific objects or actions. Another proposes holistic vocal bursts that conveyed whole meanings at once, more like a song or chant than modern speech. Maybe both existed, evolving side by side, like competing dialects of thought. Imagine standing at dusk beside a river. Two early humans are arguing, one gesturing toward a broken spear, the other defending himself. Their voices rise and fall in patterns emotional but rhythmic, almost musical. Anger and persuasion flow through pitch, not grammar. The listener doesn't need words to feel the meaning. The first argument in human history might have sounded like a duet. And it wasn't just anger, humor was there too. Playful teasing may have been one of the earliest forms of social bonding. Laughter confirmed friendship. Mimicking another's voice or action could both amuse and communicate. The instinct to roast someone kindly, that's ancient. You could say sarcasm has been with us since mammoth season. But for all its emerging beauty, speech was still fragile, a delicate experiment in evolution. Misunderstandings were frequent. Sometimes a sound meant one thing in one group and something different in another. Migration spread variation, quickly creating the first linguistic divides. Yet that diversity even then was power. It allowed groups to form distinct identities. By this time, roughly 100,000 years ago, the human vocal tract was fully modern. Our ancestors could make nearly every sound found in any modern language. The toolset was complete. All that remained was mastery. One night as stars burn bright over an African valley, a group gathers by a fire. The leader, tired from the hunt, begins to speak not in grunts, but in rhythmic tones that the others follow. He's not warning or instructing this time, he's telling. The story of the hunt becomes a shared memory, a performance. The group listens, laughs, sighs. For the first time, they understand not just what happened, but how it felt. From that moment, language no longer belonged only to survival. It belonged to humanity's soul. By now, sound had become the thread stitching humans together, and something extraordinary began to happen: individuality. The ability to name, to identify, to single out one person from another. Words weren't just tools anymore. They were mirrors. The first time someone received a name, the human story changed forever. Imagine it. A small band of early humans sits near a glowing fire under the vast African night. One woman, clever with tools, mimics the sound of striking stone, tak-tak. When she gestures toward the young man who always works beside her, she repeats it, smiling. The others laugh and nod. Tak-tak. It sticks. He's no longer just another face in the tribe. He's Tak. A name has been born. That might sound simple, but naming was a revolution. It meant recognition, memory, and social identity. Anthropologists suggest that names likely emerged from nicknames tied to behavior skill or sound: One Eye, Swift Foot, Firechild. These were shorthand ways of saying you in a world where survival depended on knowing who could be trusted. One quirky tidbit: in some modern hunter-gatherer cultures, names are still given based on mimicry, a sound that reminds the group of someone's laugh cough, or even their footsteps. Linguists believe this echoes the earliest naming patterns. The first words may not have been invented. They were copied from the world around us. So in that prehistoric night, when someone called Tak-tak and he turned, it wasn't just communication, it was recognition. Sound had become a symbol of identity. From this small step, language took on an entirely new role connection, not just between minds, but between souls. Calling someone by name invited them into existence. Without it, a person was invisible. With it, they were known. Scientists are still debating when humans began using names consistently. Some think it happened around the same time as symbolic art, 50,000 to 70,000 years ago, when cave paintings and ornaments appeared. That's when self-awareness blossomed. Language and identity grew side by side, feeding each other like roots intertwining beneath soil. Now picture the scene expanding. The tribe moves through a wooded valley. One hunter spots a fruit tree. He shouts tak-tak and gestures for help. The sound carries over the wind, crisp, sharp, familiar. In that instant, language acts like rope pulling one person's thought into another's mind. Its invisible magic as real then as it is today. Of course, names were only part of the transformation. As humans named each other, they began naming everything else: trees, rivers, tools, stars. To name something was to tame it, to weave it into memory. Suddenly, the world became not just experienced, but described. The power of sound was reshaping perception itself. That shift from instinct to identity is what truly set humans apart. Animals could call, mimic, even signal danger, but only humans could label, recall, and discuss. The birth of naming created the birth of history. Here's an amusing thought. Imagine a prehistoric argument about naming. One person insists that the tall tree near the camp should be called Another prefers Bar. The group debates, grunting and gesturing passionately. Somewhere in that silly disagreement lies the seed of every committee meeting you've ever suffered through. So yes, bureaucracy may be older than civilization. The emotional weight of naming grew too. Calling someone by name wasn't just practical, it was affectionate, even sacred. A whispered name meant intimacy. A shouted one meant urgency. Over time, the way names were spoken became as important as the names themselves. Pitch, tone, rhythm. These carried emotional color. Anthropologists studying ancient burial sites note that as soon as humans began naming one another, they also began burying their dead with care, as if saying, "You mattered. You had a name." In that sense, naming may have been the first act of love, and language its everlasting vessel. Meanwhile, language itself was evolving in structure. Groups began assigning consistent sounds not only to people, but to objects and actions. The concept of reference that a sound could permanently represent a thing laid the foundation of vocabulary. Tak might mean one man today, but tak plus a rising tone might mean strike. From there, combinations began forming naturally. Scientists are still debating whether these early proto-words followed patterns similar to modern grammar. Some think syntax arose spontaneously as humans combined familiar words into short strings, tak fruit or fire good. Others believe grammar developed later when memory expanded enough to hold multi-step ideas. Either way, that gradual layering of meaning turned language from signal into sentence. And the ripple effects immense. As names and words multiplied, so did cooperation, empathy, and conflict. Humans could now form alliances or feuds with breathtaking precision. Tak said this, "She promised that we will go tomorrow." Speech turned the tribe into a society. One small discovery supports this beautifully. Archaeologists studying ochre markings at Blombos Cave in South Africa, about 75,000 years old, found geometric carvings likely made with deliberate intent. These marks might not be writing yet, but they hint that language had already evolved beyond sound into symbol. Humans were learning to externalize thought, to leave traces of meaning for those not present. Back at that firelight gathering, the tribe settles again as night falls. The air is full of warmth, laughter, and the sound of names, each one a tiny masterpiece of memory. Someone hums a low rhythm. Others join. The names blend into music, half chant, half lullaby. In those voices, the world is being sung into existence, each name, each tone, a promise that nothing and no one will be forgotten. Night again, but this time the air hums with more than fire and wind. Around the flickering glow, the clan's murmurs weave into something new rhythm. The cadence of breathing, the crackle of flame, the steady pulse of heartbeats all begin to align. In that quiet circle, meaning takes on a beat. The rhythm of life itself becomes language's silent partner. This is the dawn of prosody, the melody and rhythm of speech. Before humans had words, they had tone and timing. And if you think that sounds like music, you're absolutely right. Scientists are still debating whether song came before speech or whether the two evolved together. But one thing is certain: rhythm gave sound its structure. Imagine the scene. The fire pops. A woman begins to hum softly, not random, but measured. Another taps a stick against a hollow log in the same pattern. The children join clapping, laughing. Soon, The entire group moves as one body swaying in time. Their sounds rise and fall filled with meaning that doesn't need translation. It's not yet language, but it's close, a shared heartbeat turned into sound. Anthropologists call this the musa-language hypothesis, the idea that speech evolved from emotional vocalizations shaped by rhythm. If that's true, then every lullaby, every chant, every poem you've ever heard is a direct descendant of those ancient sounds under firelight. Here's a fun fact: the human brain processes both music and language in overlapping regions. The same neural networks that help you understand a melody also help you grasp sentence intonation. So when you hear someone's tone and know instantly whether they're joking, angry, or kind, that's a survival instinct as old as the Stone Age. Now picture an early human group by a riverbank at dawn. Mist rolls low over the water and someone begins mimicking the gentle rhythm of dripping dew. Tick, tick, tick. Another imitates a bird call. A third adds a rising hum. Within moments, they've created something resembling song. And through it, they express calm, belonging, gratitude emotions that words will one day carry. The rhythm doesn't just connect them to each other. It connects them to memory. Neuroscientists today know that rhythm enhances recall. The same trick that helps you remember song lyrics helped ancient humans remember hunting paths, edible plants, and seasonal changes. Chant became a mnemonic device, the first version of write it down. It's likely that rhythm and repetition shaped early speech patterns too. Short repeating syllables, balaka, may have been used to describe actions or sequences. Imagine hunters chanting kakaka to imitate the pounding of feet, or gatherers murmuring mama to signal many. Slowly, repetition became habit and habit became structure. Still, no one quite agrees on where meaning first nested. Was it in tone, rhythm, or association? Scientists are still debating whether sound itself carries emotional universality. For example, high-pitched tones often express smallness or nearness, while low ones signal danger or size. This sound symbolism is consistent across cultures, suggesting that rhythm and pitch might have guided early humans towards shared emotional codes before actual words existed. And maybe that's why music still moves us in ways language can't. Deep inside our brains, remember those nights when sound meant safety, when rhythm meant we were not alone. There's an intriguing theory that rhythm also birthed morality. Groups that sang or chanted together released endorphins, bonding them emotionally. Synchrony built trust. It's no coincidence that armies march in step, monks chant in unison, and crowds cheer in rhythm. These are echoes of ancient gatherings where survival depended on unity. Let's slip back to that night again. The group's hum becomes stronger, pulsing through the air like a living thing. Someone changes the pattern, a sudden pause, then a double tap. The others mimic it. The change becomes meaningful. A shift in rhythm might now signal stop or turn. In that instant, rhythm crosses the threshold into language. A funny thought, maybe early humans didn't invent grammar. Maybe they danced it first. The pauses, the beats, the stresses, all precursors to sentence structure. Even modern linguists describe speech in musical terms: pitch, tone, rhythm, cadence. We still talk the way our ancestors sang. And in that singing, there was storytelling. Before words could describe, rhythm could reenact. The thump of hands on hollow logs became the gallop of animals. The rising and falling hum became the sound of wind and fire. These early soundscapes carried shared emotion, excitement, fear, triumph. The first story might have been performed entirely through sound and gesture, without a single recognizable word. Yet it would have stirred hearts just the same. There's evidence that rhythm-based communication may even predate modern humans. Bonobos and chimpanzees use synchronized drumming and hooting during displays, a primitive form of social bonding. We simply refined it, giving it nuanced purpose, and eventually poetry. Scientists still debate when rhythm turned into syntax, but whatever the answer, rhythm gave language its soul. Without it, speech would be nothing but noise. As the night deepens, the fire fades to embers, and the hum slows. The clan's rhythm becomes softer, dreamlike. Their breath moves together in quiet waves, a lullaby older than civilization. Somewhere in that fading harmony, language takes one more small step forward. The next generation, listening with sleepy eyes, will remember not the exact sounds, but the pattern. And when they grow, they'll repeat it, reshape it, and add new meaning. The rhythm of meaning never dies. It simply evolves, passing from firelight to cradle song, from drumbeat to heartbeat, from ancient hum to whispered word. The days of simple signals were over. Humanity had found something it could never let go of: the thrill of sharing stories, the pleasure of connection. And somewhere in those long conversations beside fire and water, speech took its next great leap: gossip. Yes, gossip, the most underestimated force in human history. Scientists now believe that small talk, jokes, and stories were what truly cemented social groups. Sharing information about others who helped, who cheated, who brought back food, became a survival tool as vital as fire or shelter. Picture a group gathered at dusk. The hunt is over, bellies full, the air cool and lazy. One woman gestures animatedly while murmuring a string of soft sounds, imitating someone who tripped earlier while carrying meat. The others laugh, some teasing, some sympathetic. It's a harmless story, but it strengthens the bond between them. The tribe's laughter becomes its social glue. Evolutionary psychologist Robin Dunbar famously proposed that language may have replaced grooming, the way primates strengthen alliances by picking through one another's fur. As human groups grew too large to maintain through touch alone, words took over. Talking became verbal grooming. Every time someone laughed or murmured in response, invisible threads of trust formed. And that's how the human brain got addicted to talking. We speak not just to share facts, but to share feelings. The world's first bedtime stories may have started as nothing more than retellings of the day's misadventures, exaggerated, embellished, full of humor. Scientists are still debating whether gossiping was the key that unlocked abstract language. Some argue that to gossip effectively, you need grammar, the ability to describe who did what to whom. That requires structure, subject, action, object. In other words, the first grammar may have grown out of storytelling. Imagine it happening for the first time. One person gestures toward another, vocalizing something like, "Gar took meat." Everyone looks at Gar. Gar, embarrassed but proud, laughs and responds with a defensive tone that probably means no share. The group bursts into laughter. Syntax is born not in solemn learning, but in play. Over time, these playful exchanges became an unspoken social map. People learned to navigate relationships through speech. Trust was built, tested, and repaired by words. The ability to speak clearly meant more friends, more allies, and a higher chance of survival. One quirky tidbit: the parts of the brain involved in language overlap with those used for social reasoning, empathy, prediction, deception. In a way, our talent for conversation evolved as an extension of our ability to imagine what others are thinking. The next time you're chatting with someone and instinctively guess their mood from a single phrase, remember you're using a skill refined over hundreds of millennia. Now think of how stories must have grown. The day's events became tales retold around the fire. Each retelling added new flair, a boast here, an exaggeration there. Over time, the group's storytellers became informal leaders, their voices carrying weight, If you could make people laugh or gasp, you had influence. That's when language became entertainment. Before Netflix, before theatre, there were storytellers, perhaps the most ancient profession of all. Through words, they carried the tribe's history, its warnings and its humour. A study of indigenous oral traditions reveals that many groups passed down vital information through storytelling, like how to find water or when to move camp. But those lessons are wrapped in emotion and suspense. That's exactly what early humans were doing, wrapping survival in story. The hunter who could tell a tale became as valuable as the one who could throw a spear. Scientists are still debating whether these firelight stories were mainly factual or fanciful. Some think they were memory exercises, helping clans remember who owed whom or which foods were safe. Others see them as proto-myths, blending truth with imagination. Both possibilities show how language expanded beyond necessity. It began to shape culture. And there's another layer to gossip morality. When a group talks about someone who breaks the rules, they enforce social norms without violence. Don't steal, don't lie, share with the group, all reinforced through chatter. Words replaced punishment. The tribe didn't need laws. It had conversation. Imagine the soothing murmur of voices as night deepens. Someone begins retelling a hunt from earlier that day, the stumble, the laughter, the triumph. Others add details, correct, embellish. The rhythm of dialogue flows like water, each sound overlapping the next. Children drift to sleep, listening to the soft rise and fall of speech, the sound of safety itself. One person, the clan's elder, joins in last. His tone lowers slower, now telling not of today, but of yesterday, of ancestors, of seasons of lessons. Everyone listens spellbound. He doesn't need grand words. His pauses, his breath, his rhythm say enough. The line between gossip and story blurs. The tribe has discovered narrative. And just like that conversation stops being about who tripped or who laughed, it becomes about why things happen, a question no animal had ever asked before. So the next time you find yourself deep in conversation, sharing something funny or confessing something small, remember you're echoing those ancient nights. The warmth of the voice beside you, the shared laughter, the feeling of being understood, it's all prehistoric. Gossip, laughter, storytelling. These are the first bricks in the cathedral of language. The rhythm of words and laughter carried far beyond one campfire. Over countless generations, human bands migrated, mingled, and drifted apart. Each group carried its own evolving sounds, tiny seeds of dialect that began to take root wherever they went. In this way, the first families of speech were born. The world was changing. Ice advanced and retreated, forests thickened and thin rivers cut new paths. Humans followed the herds, bringing with them not only tools and fire, but language. Yet as they spread, their tongues began to twist differently. Distance does funny things to sound. Over mountains, across deserts, in forests, where echoes warped the air, pronunciation shifted, meanings evolved. One group's ka for water became another's ge and another's ha. Scientists are still debating whether language evolved once and diversified, or whether multiple distinct speech systems emerged independently. Either way, variation was inevitable. Language, like wind, bends to its environment. Picture two groups meeting at the edge of a wide river. They look similar, but their words have changed. One points to a deer and says more. The other says gnaw. They pause, confused for a moment. Then one mimics the animal's leap. Both laugh, understanding without translation. Gesture still bridges what words divide. That moment, recognition through difference, might be the origin of diplomacy. As these early tongues diverged, each carried its own rhythm and melody. One community used more guttural sounds, another preferred softer ones. The environment itself shaped these choices. Open plains favored loud, clear syllables that traveled far. Dense forests favored softer tones to avoid startling prey. Even climate played a role. Cold air encourages shorter breaths. Warmer air allows longer vowels. Nature quite literally tuned our speech. The funny part, those influences still echo today. Linguists have found that languages spoken in humid regions often contain more tonal variation, while those from arid climates favor clipped consonants. The earth shaped our accents before microphones ever existed. Now imagine life at this stage. Small clans, perhaps 50 or 60 people each, with its own lexicon of a few hundred words. They meet others from neighboring valleys during migration seasons, sometimes to trade, sometimes to compete. A fascinating thing happens then, language contact. Two groups with different words begin imitating one another to survive together. Some words merge, some vanish. Over time, entirely new dialects form. This process continues endlessly. The first Pidgin's simple trade languages likely emerged here. Limited vocabularies, but high creativity you-me-go. For cooperation, food share for trade. The simplicity was powerful. It allowed strangers to collaborate, even to fall in love. In those exchanges, humanity's first multicultural societies flickered into being. Scientists are still debating how early this linguistic blending occurred, but evidence from genetics suggests humans were constantly mixing even before written history. Language, like DNA, was always fluid. Let's linger on one such imagined meeting. Two groups converge near an ancient lake. They eye each other warily at first, then begin mimicking gestures, friend food fire. A woman steps forward, offering a piece of roasted meat. The other woman responds with a sound, a soft, repeated syllable meaning thanks. The first tries to copy it, and laughter erupts. That laughter, its mutual comprehension, the oldest treaty in the world. Soon shared words emerged, for Waterloo, for firebar, for man, for child. They're simple but universal. Over months of trade and friendship, these new sounds take on permanence. When the groups part, they carry fragments of each other's speech, tiny tokens of peace embedded in breath. Linguists believe this is how language families spread. Proto-languages born from blending and isolation became the ancestors of everything from Latin to Sanskrit to Navajo. Each change left behind faint echoes of that first universal tongue, now long lost. There's a curious modern parallel. Whenever you travel to a new country and pick up a few local words, hello, thank you, friend, you're replaying that ancient pattern. Humans have always been linguistic borrowers. Every culture's speech carries fingerprints of another's. But variation also led to misunderstanding, and misunderstanding led to myth. When neighboring groups misheard each other's words, strange stories arose. Perhaps one tribe's name for river spirits sounded like another's word for thunder. A legend forms. Soon the sound of foreign speech itself becomes magical, sacred, or frightening. The earliest myths about voices of the gods may have begun as confusion between neighboring tribes. That's the beauty and tragedy of language. It unites and divides in equal measure. Now picture a moonlit night by that same lake. Two youths from different clans sit together, their words halting but curious. They teach each other simple phrases, laughter follows each mispronunciation. Maybe they share food, maybe a promise. Their words mix, their lives intertwine. When their children are born, they'll grow up speaking both tongues, fluent in unity. And just like that, the first bilinguals walk the earth. So as tribes scatter their tongues, swirl like currents, mixing, splitting, reforming. The global chorus begins. From Africa to Asia to Europe, Each migration leaves behind an accent, a rhythm, a memory. Every voice in the world today, every syllable ever spoken, traces its lineage to those early riversides where laughter bridged difference. The world has learned to speak in 1,000 ways at once. By now, humanity's world was no longer a silent wilderness. It was a living web of voices. But what truly made these early tongues remarkable wasn't just their variety. It was the emotion inside them. The first words weren't cold tools of logic. They pulsed with feeling anger, joy, affection, even sarcasm. Speech had become not only a way to say things, but a way to feel them. Scientists are still debating when emotion first began shaping language. Some suggest tone came before syntax. Others believe emotional coloring evolved later once speech patterns matured. But it's hard to imagine language ever being sterile. From the moment humans could produce pitch and rhythm, emotion was baked in. Picture an early couple arguing at the mouth of a cave. He points toward the hills where the hunting party vanished. She crosses her arms and makes a sharp nasal sound, something halfway between tisk and na. The meaning is clear, you're wrong. He grumbles, waves his arms, and imitates her voice in mockery. She laughs despite herself. In that instant, frustration melts into humor. The first lovers' quarrel complete with tone, irony, and reconciliation. That's the strange magic of language. It lets us disagree without fighting. Words replace claws and fists. Instead of battling for dominance, humans could now argue, persuade, even tease. The voice became a safer battlefield and an arena of art. Neuroscientists call this affective prosody, the emotional melody carried by pitch and rhythm. Modern studies show that people can often understand a speaker's feelings even when they don't know the words. A shout, a whisper, a sigh, they speak a universal language older than grammar itself. One quirky tidbit: some linguists believe that laughter and crying are proto-languages, still embedded in our brains, raw signals of emotion that predate speech. You can't fake them easily, which is why laughter builds trust, and false laughter feels wrong. Our ancestors probably learned early that tone reveals truth. Even now, your brain detects sincerity in milliseconds long before your conscious mind catches up. Imagine a small gathering after sunset. The day has been long, full of rain and hunger. The group sits in silence until one child begins to mimic thunder, rah, rah, rah. Another adds a pretend lightning strike with a clap of hands. Laughter follows, breaking tension. Soon voices mimic wind and rain, turning hardship into play. This is more than communication. It's catharsis. Through sound they process fear and transform it into art. From that playful mimicry grew something deeper: empathy. When words can mirror emotions, they connect minds. A whispered of comfort, a rising oh of wonder. These were not just noises but shared experiences. The tribe that could empathize survived better than the one that stayed mute. You could say language evolved not from intellect, but from compassion. Scientists are still debating whether the ability to feel another's emotion through voice, what we call emotional contagion, was a byproduct of language or its foundation. Either way, it became humanity's superpower. With words, one person could make another feel something from across the fire: fear, joy, love, belonging. Soon, speech began reflecting the full range of human life. Affection entered the voice in coos and pet names. Anger grew sharp, clipped, and loud. Humor came through irony and exaggeration tools to diffuse tension. Modern research shows that even today jokes strengthen group identity and signal safety. When early humans teased one another, they weren't just having fun, they were reaffirming bonds. Let's imagine one such scene. Two hunters return empty-handed. The rest of the clan greets them with mock groans and exaggerated gestures of disappointment. One woman calls out something that probably means great job in a sarcastic tone. Everyone laughs, including the hunters. The tension of failure dissolves in humor. Language, laughter, and survival are now inseparable. And with that emotional depth, storytelling transforms. Stories are no longer mere reports of events. They're performances of feeling. The storyteller doesn't just say, "We hunted." He reenacts it, mimicking voices, tones, and sounds. He makes the listeners feel the chase, the fear, the triumph. Modern anthropologists studying oral traditions find that emotional tone still drives memory. We remember what moves us, not what merely informs us. The first storytellers knew this instinctively. Their voices rose to thrill, fell to soothe, trembled to warn. The earliest bedtime stories weren't about morals. They were about comfort, a gentle descent from the chaos of life into the safety of sleep. But emotion also brought danger. Once humans could speak with passion, they could lie with conviction. The same melodic tones that soothed a child could deceive a rival. Some linguists suggest that the invention of lying, yes, lying, may have evolved alongside complex language. After all, only creatures who can imagine another's belief can manipulate it. Speech gave us both empathy and mischief in equal measure. One can almost picture it, a prehistoric scoundrel returning to camp, pretending to have seen a mammoth just over the ridge. The others rush out, spears ready, while he snickers by the fire, enjoying the leftover stew alone. Mischievous, absolutely, but also evidence of a growing mind. To lie is to imagine, and imagination, for better or worse, is the heartbeat of creativity. Over time, words for emotions themselves appear the first abstract vocabulary. Perhaps RA for anger, Ha for laughter, No for fear. These proto-words allowed people not only to express emotion, but to talk about it. That's a seismic leap consciousness turning inward. Humanity begins not just to feel, but to reflect. As night falls again, the campfire flickers low. A mother hums to her child. A pair of friends share quiet laughter. Two elders whisper about the past, their tones low and warm. The fire crackles, echoing the rise and fall of their speech like a heartbeat made of light. And there it is, the first symphony of human emotion, playing softly against the canvas of the dark. Language had now become far more than a tool, it was power. Not brute strength, not speed, but influence. The first humans who mastered sound had discovered a way to move others not with muscle, but with meaning. A simple vibration of the throat could stir courage, ease fear, or spark rebellion. Words were fast becoming the world's first form of leadership. Picture the scene: a storm gathers on the horizon. Thunder rumbles through the valley, where a small group of early humans huddles for shelter. Rain lashes against their shelter of hide and wood. Lightning strikes, illuminating faces wet with fear. Then a single voice rises above the chaos. Calm, low, rhythmic. It doesn't matter what's being said. The tone itself steadies the heart. The others listen, their breathing slows. The voice carries authority, compassion, control. That person, whoever they are, has just become the first leader by speech. Scientists are still debating when persuasion first entered language. Some anthropologists argue that rhetoric, the ability to inspire through sound, may have appeared as soon as humans developed tone control. Before logic, before syntax, there was rhythm. A steady rhythm spoken at the right time could unite a group more effectively than any spear. And once humans learned they could move others through words, the possibilities became endless. Around every fire, certain voices began to stand out: those who spoke with clarity, who used rhythm to guide and melody to soothe. These people weren't just talkers. They were early orators, healers, shamans. One quirky tidbit in nearly every culture today: the tone of spiritual leaders mirrors the soft, melodic cadence of lullabies. It's as if our brains still recognize authority, not through volume, but through calm. A soothing voice then and now carries primal weight. Imagine a gathering after a difficult hunt. The tribe sits silently, disappointment heavy. Then the elder begins to speak slow, deliberate, using pauses the way a musician uses rests. He recounts how the ancestors once faced similar hardship, his voice painting pictures in the air. Gradually, heads lift, tension melts. The mood shifts from despair to resolve. Without a single tool, he's rebuilt their spirit. Language at last had learned to command emotion. But with that came something equally powerful: deception. The same way words could inspire, they could manipulate. The storyteller could now shape not only memories but beliefs. The spirits demand this, the mountain forbids, that the stars promised our hunt will succeed. Whether true or not, these phrases created order. Belief became a new survival strategy. Scientists are still debating whether myth-making evolved consciously or accidentally. Perhaps the earliest myths were simply explanations for nature's mysteries: thunder as anger wind, as breath fire, as life. But once stories gained power, leaders used them. Speech could now control the invisible. Let's slip into one of those prehistoric nights. The fire burns, low shadows dance on the cave walls. An elder stands, raises his hands, and begins to speak voice-deep words, slow, filled with deliberate rhythm. Around him, others watch wide-eyed. He tells of the great beast in the sky, the bringer of rain and light. When it growls, they must take shelter. When it smiles, they may hunt. The crowd nods entranced. The first sermon, the first myth, the first act of human persuasion. It's easy to see why speech carried spiritual weight. Before writing, the spoken word was reality. To say something was to make it so. Words held the power of creation and destruction. One careless sentence could divide a clan. One promise could bind it. Language became sacred by necessity. Even today you can feel that inheritance. Think of courtroom oaths, wedding vows, political speeches, all hinge on the faith we place in sound. The prehistoric roots of this ritualistic reverence for words are still humming beneath every microphone and whisper. Back in that cave, the elder finishes his story. For a moment silence reigns, then murmurs spread a shared awe. They don't just hear him, they believe him. The firelight flickers, and the storyteller's shadow grows tall against the stone. For the first time in history, imagination rules reality. From that night forward, humans begin crafting narratives not only about what is, but what could be. The leader's voice becomes the heartbeat of the tribe, a voice of vision. In one corner, a child listens intently, eyes wide. Tomorrow, she'll mimic that cadence, retelling the story to others. The torch of language, once a spark, is now a blazing chain of meaning passed from voice to voice. Scientists are still debating whether this phase, when persuasion and imagination fused, marks the true birth of culture. If so, it means civilization began not with tools or farming, but with storytelling. And every culture, no matter how distant or advanced, still carries the echo of that first cave sermon in its myths, prayers, and bedtime stories. Let's not forget the emotional side of this transformation. The ability to move others through speech meant humans could now offer comfort in loss, hope in hunger, courage in fear. Words became medicine. A whispered assurance, "We'll be safe," could ease a trembling child's heart better than any shelter. And so, as the storm finally fades, the tribe curls beside the dying fire. The leader's words still hang in the air like embers. Outside, rain softens to mist. The night hums quietly, the earth at peace. For the first time, humans don't just survive the dark, they understand it. Language had now become self-aware, a living organism made of breath and thought. It was no longer just about naming things or commanding others. It began to follow hidden patterns. Repetition, rhythm, and structure shaped how people spoke, and slowly those habits hardened into the first grammar. Humanity was learning how to build meaning the way it built shelters, one piece at a time. It likely began innocently enough. When hunters returned from a successful chase, they didn't just shout food anymore. They said something closer to "we bring food, a sequence, and order." That order mattered. It told who acted, what happened, and to whom. Without realizing it, early humans had invented syntax. Scientists are still debating how grammar first formed. Some argue it emerged naturally from repetition and pattern recognition. Our brains love order. Others suggest it arose from necessity, when groups needed more precise ways to express complex ideas like time calls or intention. Either way, once grammar appeared, language exploded in complexity. Imagine a conversation around a fire. A child mimics an adult: "You hunt, I wait." Another corrects her: "No, I hunt, you wait." The rhythm of cause and consequence begins to set. Over time, certain sound orders feel more right than others. Those preferences crystallize into rules, unwritten, unspoken, but instinctive. A quirky fact: linguists have discovered that every known human language, no matter how ancient or isolated, uses similar grammatical principles, distinctions between subject, verb, and object. Even sign languages, created spontaneously among deaf children, develop grammar within a generation. That suggests structure isn't cultural, it's biological. The human brain is wired for pattern. Now imagine an elder trying to teach others about the past. Yesterday rain came. A new idea slips in time. Soon, there are words for before, after, tomorrow, now. For the first time, humans can speak not only of what is, but what was and will be. The voice becomes a time machine. Scientists are still debating when humans began using tenses, but many believe it coincided with the rise of symbolic thought, the ability to imagine events beyond the present. That's why grammar isn't just structure, it's philosophy. It lets us exist in multiple moments at once. And with grammar came humor, glorious, mischievous humor. Once people could rearrange words, they could also twist them. A hunter might say, "I didn't miss the mammoth missed me." Laughter follows. Irony is born. The ability to play with language became a mark of intelligence, a way to test mental agility and social charm. One quirky tidbit: even modern infants display early grammar sense. By 9 months they notice when words appear in unexpected order. Our ancestors, it seems, were similarly alert to pattern. That instinct built the framework of speech long before literacy existed. Of course, grammar didn't form neatly. It was messy, regional, and full of mistakes. Some words merged, others drifted. But those errors often led to innovation. Think of it as linguistic evolution, trial and error powered by curiosity. Picture a young woman beside the fire telling a story about the hunt. She says, "We find big beast." Another interrupts laughing. "No, we found big beast." Everyone chuckles at the mistake, yet the correction spreads. Within a generation, a new past tense is born. History quite literally comes from laughter. Over time, these small adjustments accumulate. Speech becomes recursive, words combine to form new meanings. Fire good becomes fire make food good. From there, questions arise. Who make fire? Why no fire today? Questions, that's the real turning point. To question is to think beyond what is given. Grammar gave humanity the power to doubt, to wonder, to dream. Scientists are still debating when language first became recursive, when humans began nesting ideas inside others. I think that you know that I'm tired. But this cognitive leap probably marked the final step toward full modern speech. The moment thought could reflect on thought, consciousness deepened. Let's return to that ancient camp. The fire crackles. A mother sits with her child and begins a familiar story. Once before the big rain, the child interrupts eagerly. Then the beasts come. The mother nods, smiling. The child's question completes the pattern. Both follow the rhythm of cause and effect. The story continues smooth as a song. The repetition of phrases once, then after, helps memory and emotion intertwine. Grammar doesn't just make speech clearer, it makes it musical. Even now, storytellers and poets rely on these same structures, the same melodic cadence that soothed our ancestors by firelight. And here's something beautiful: studies show that grammar activates pleasure centers in the brain. When we hear a well-formed sentence, we get a tiny rush of satisfaction, as if our minds are saying, "Ah, that fits." Early humans must have felt it too, though they wouldn't have had a word for it. Perhaps they simply smiled when a story sounded right. But grammar also carried the seeds of misunderstanding. Once rules existed, breaking them could change meaning, sometimes disastrously. One misplaced tone or syllable could turn praise into insult. The same sound that once meant come might now mean go. Language had grown powerful enough to unite or divide with a single mistake. And yet, that danger only deepened its beauty. Speech wasn't static. It was alive. It grew, evolved, adapted. Through grammar, humanity discovered its greatest creative tool: infinite expression from finite sounds. Every joke, every story, every promise still follows that ancient pattern. As dawn breaks, the tribe stirs. The air hums with quiet voices, plans, dreams, gentle teasing. Somewhere a child practices words under their breath, stringing them together clumsily, joyfully. Me go hunt. Me find big fish. The adults smile, but don't correct. They know what's happening. Another mind has joined the endless song of speech, imperfect, evolving, magnificent. By now, speech had grown sophisticated enough to do something no creature on earth had ever done: tell stories about the unseen. Humans no longer spoke only of food, danger, or weather. They began to speak of dreams, of spirits, of mysteries in the sky. The words that once named things now built worlds. Night after night, around countless fires, stories rose like smoke tails explaining thunder, death stars, and the unknown forces that ruled their lives. This was more than entertainment. It was humanity's first attempt to make sense of the cosmos. Scientists are still debating when the first myths appeared. Some believe they emerged alongside burial rituals nearly 100,000 years ago, when humans first began to wonder what happened after death. Others argue that myth arose later as language grew capable of abstraction. But however it began, one thing is clear: speech turned fear into narrative, and narrative into comfort. Imagine a night in the Paleolithic age. The fire glows, casting shadows that dance across cave walls. A storm brews outside, thunder rolling like the voice of an unseen giant. The children huddle close. An elder clears his throat and begins to speak. His voice is low, steady, measured, the same rhythm that once calmed hunters and soothed infants. He tells them of Sky Father, whose footsteps make thunder, whose eyes flash lightning when angered. The storm outside no longer feels like chaos. It feels like story. Fear transforms into wonder. That moment when imagination tamed terror was one of humanity's greatest leaps. With language, the unknown became explainable, and soon stories multiplied. Every valley, every tribe had its own myth to explain the mysteries of nature, the rising sun as a bird with flaming wings, the wind as the sigh of ancestors, the sea as a sleeping beast. Each narrative became a way to share lessons, to pass wisdom from one generation to the next. But myths weren't only about gods, they were also about people. Early storytelling gave birth to heroes hunters who outsmarted lions, mothers who crossed rivers to save their children, tricksters who brought fire from the sky. Through these characters, humans practiced empathy. They imagined lives beyond their own. Archaeologists have found hints of this in cave art scenes, not just of animals, but of action and intent. In Chauvet and Lascaux, painted figures seem to move, chase, and interact. These are frozen moments of narrative proof that humans weren't only seeing the world, they were telling it. One quirky tidbit: some neuroscientists think that storytelling developed as a kind of simulation engine, a way for humans to test scenarios safely. When someone told of a dangerous hunt or a near-death escape, the listeners' brains lit up as if they were there themselves. Stories trained the tribe without risking lives. The first fables weren't just moral, they were practical survival lessons. And just like that, language became humanity's first virtual reality. But stories did something else too. They built community. Shared myths gave groups a sense of unity. We come from this ancestor, we were born of that mountain. These shared beliefs forged identity long before borders or writing existed. Scientists are still debating whether storytelling emerged as a social invention or a spiritual one. Perhaps both. Once speech carried imagination, it naturally reached toward the sacred. After all, when someone could describe what couldn't be seen, God's dreams, soul, speech itself began to feel divine. Picture another scene. A hunter returns from the plains with wide eyes. He claims he saw fire fall from the stars. His companions gather around as he mimics the event, voice trembling, hands gesturing. He invents sounds to describe brightness, speed, awe. The others repeat them, and those sounds become words. A new part of the world has been named not through seeing, but through telling. This blending of observation and imagination marks the birth of oral tradition. From here, stories begin to echo across generations, evolving with each retelling. By the 10th time, a myth is told. It's transformed, part memory, part dream. Language had become the thread connecting past to present the invisible web, holding human history together. One night, a storyteller adds rhythm to his tale, a chant, a refrain repeated after each scene. The children join in. When the thunder roared, the people hid. The refrain builds anticipation, helping them remember. That pattern, call and response, still exists in songs, prayers, and bedtime stories today. It's one of humanity's oldest creative instincts, the desire to participate, not just to listen. And perhaps that's why stories endure. They give everyone a role: speaker, listener, believer. The act of storytelling is both performance and communion, a shared heartbeat that says we're in this together. By now, words have grown powerful enough to outlive their speakers. A story told tonight may still be remembered decades later. That realization that sound can defeat time must have felt like magic. The tribe doesn't know it, but they've discovered immortality through narrative. A person's deeds once spoken will live as long as someone remembers the words. In that way, the first storytellers became the first historians, philosophers, and dreamers. As the night deepens, the elder finishes his tale. The storm outside has calmed, but the children are wide awake, their imaginations alight. The firelight glows on their faces, their eyes reflecting the same wonder found in every story ever told. And as the last spark fades into the dark, a soft whisper remains the echo of humanity's oldest truth words. Don't just describe the world, they created. As generations rolled on the tongues of humankind began to multiply, like seeds carried on the wind. Isolation gave each group its own soundscape, new accents, rhythms, and symbols. Language diversified as surely as life itself. But with distance came both beauty and confusion. Humanity's unity of voice began to splinter into 1,000 melodies. Picture the world around 60,000 years ago. Vast plains, shifting deserts, thick jungles, and small bands of people scattered across continents. Each group, separated by mountain or sea, slowly shaped its own language. What began as one stream of shared sound now branched into countless rivers. The world was humming in dialects. Scientists are still debating whether there was ever a single mother tongue, a proto-human language from which all others descend, or whether several languages evolved independently. It's a linguistic mystery as deep as the stars. But whether one or many the result was the same diversity born from migration. The isolation was gradual. One family moved across a valley, another over a ridge. 1,000 years later, their descendants could no longer understand each other perfectly. Water became vata, then woda, then aqua. The syllables drifted like sand in wind, and yet the roots remained faint echoes of their ancestors' voices. It's a funny thing linguists today can still trace words back tens of thousands of years. The word for mother, for example, still carries the same M sound across nearly every language, mama madre mi maya. That little hum of tenderness has survived ice ages, migrations, and civilizations. It's humanity's oldest shared lullaby. Now imagine two groups meeting after centuries apart. They approach warily, their words strange to each other's ears. One gestures toward food and says something like noka. The other tilts her head, repeats the sound, and replies, noka. Good. They laugh, relieved. Once again, laughter bridges the gap. Words cannot. The human instinct to connect is older than language, and perhaps stronger. But over time, differences deepened. Some groups developed words for snow and reindeer, others for sand and palm trees. Language became geography. Even the way people thought began to shift. Scientists are still debating whether language shapes thought the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis. It suggests that the structure of your language influences how you perceive reality. A tribe whose language has no word for left or right, for example, might navigate by cardinal directions. Instead, the cup is north of the bowl. To them, the world itself is a compass. Words don't just describe reality, they define it. In this way, as tongues multiplied, so did worlds. Each group lived in its own version of reality, carved by its own vocabulary. Yet beneath all the variety, one heartbeat remained the human urge to understand and be understood. And so, even as languages diverged, the longing to reunite them persisted. Trade, travel, marriage all brought speech into contact again. The world's first multilinguals became living bridges between tribes. These wanderers could move freely between groups, carrying not just goods, but ideas, myths, and songs. They were the first translators, the earliest diplomats, the original storytellers of humanity. Let's picture one such traveler. A young woman stands on a ridge looking down at two river valleys, one home, one foreign. She knows the words of both. Her people call Fayaka, the others call it Aro. She cups her hands, shouts across the gap, Ka Aro. The distant figures understand both sounds, smiling. A small miracle happens, two words, one meaning one world. That's the quiet genius of language. No matter how much it divides, it also invites reunion. Every translation is an act of love, a promise that difference isn't the end of understanding. One quirky tidbit: when modern linguists map the world's languages, they find that nearly everyone can be grouped into families: Indo-European, Afro-Asiatic, Sino-Tibetan, Niger-Congo, and so on. But every family, no matter how distant, shares faint echoes of phonetic patterns. It's as if the ghost of the first conversation still lingers beneath them all. As humanity spread farther to frozen tundras, to island chains, to mountains touching the clouds, even gestures and facial expressions began to shift. Yet certain instincts never changed. A smile, a nod, a sigh, those are the universal words untouched by time. When language failed, emotion filled the silence. Now imagine a vast plain dotted with fires. From each one rises a different music, one clan chanting deep throaty tones, another singing sharp high syllables. Yet the rhythm, the pulse of breath, the melody of meaning remains identical. Humanity's languages are many, but its cadence is one. Scientists are still debating how far back this rhythm goes, whether it's rooted in heartbeat, breath, or the pace of walking. But perhaps it doesn't matter. What matters is that rhythm became the one thing all languages share, the echo of our shared origin. By now, language wasn't just communication. It was art. People began shaping words for beauty's sake, rhymes, chant songs that meant more than the sum of their parts. Poetry, music, and prayer emerged not from civilization, but from the campfire. And here's a beautiful irony: the more languages diverged, the more creative they became. Some built tones into meaning. Others invented grammatical gender-click consonants or intricate honorifics. Language was evolving faster than biology, reflecting the infinite complexity of the human mind. Yet deep down, they were all saying the same things, the same longings, the same fears, the same dreams. Where is food? Will we live? Do you love me? What comes after we die? The accents changed, but the heart never did. One can imagine a night long ago, travelers gathered, where rivers meet, trading words as easily as they trade beads. Their languages differ, but their laughter sounds the same. As stars shimmer above, a child falls asleep, to voices blending softly, incomprehensible, yet comforting. In that harmony of difference, humanity's great paradox, is born countless voices, one story. By now the world was alive with voices, not just as a way to survive, but as a way to think. Language, which had once been an instinctive cry, had turned into the scaffolding of the human mind itself. With every generation, speech reshaped the way humans imagined, remembered, and dreamed. Something extraordinary had happened in silence. Language began to rewire thought. When humans learned to name things, they didn't just describe the world, they organized it. The word became a box that could hold an idea, and those boxes could be stacked, sorted, and combined. Suddenly, memory wasn't bound to instinct or emotion. It could be stored in sound. Scientists are still debating whether thought can exist without language. Some say internal speech is essential to reasoning. Others argue that imagination can exist independently. But what's clear is that once words entered the mind, they multiplied like sparks. Humans could now reflect on their reflections, imagine conversations before speaking, even argue with themselves. The first inner voice was born. Imagine a young hunter standing on a hill watching clouds drift across the afternoon sky. He traces their shapes in his mind and murmurs softly, perhaps describing them with simple syllables. For the first time, the world outside has an echo inside his head. That echo is language. It's not spoken aloud, yet it shapes how he sees. The human mind has become a dialogue. Linguists call this metacognition, thinking about thinking, and language is its most powerful tool. Once humans could describe thoughts, they could plan, doubt, question, and dream. The mind was no longer a mirror, it was a stage. One quirky tidbit: when modern neuroscientists scan the brain during internal monologue, They find activity in the same areas used for speech, as if we're constantly whispering to ourselves. That whisper born in the Stone Age is still running inside every one of us. With language as its engine, imagination soared. Early humans began to play with what if. What if we hunt here tomorrow? What if the rain doesn't stop? What if the stars are watching? This ability to simulate the future transformed existence. For the first time, humans could plan not just for today, but for generations ahead. Speech also gave birth to abstract thought. Words like many before, never, because invisible concepts yet indispensable, allowed people to connect ideas that weren't physically present. It's one thing to see a tree and grunt tree. It's another to say, when tree falls, fire comes. That's not observation, that's logic. Scientists are still debating when abstraction truly took hold, but evidence suggests it might have been around 50,000 years ago, the so-called cognitive revolution. Suddenly, humans were making art jewelry and music symbols for feelings they could now articulate. The mind had bloomed into philosophy long before anyone could write it down. Picture a gathering in a deep limestone cave. Firelight dances across walls covered in ochre and charcoal drawings, animals mid-leap, humans with outstretched arms, spirals and dots. A figure stands before them speaking softly. The words flow with rhythm, pointing from one painting to the next. This is more than art. Its explanation may be even ceremony. The paintings are ideas given, form the words a bridge between generations. That's the power of speech. It made memory portable. Before language, wisdom died with the body. Now stories, knowledge, and emotion could live beyond the individual. Every spoken tale was a time capsule carrying experience forward through the air from parent to child elder to apprentice, generation to generation. Think of how extraordinary that is. One person could now influence someone they'd never meet. A mother's voice could teach her grandchildren's grandchildren. Language had stretched the reach of the human mind far beyond the limits of life itself. And with that, empathy deepened too. Words allowed humans to share invisible pain, grief, hope, longing. If you can name what hurts, you can begin to heal it. The first person who said something like, "I am sad," must have astonished their companions. For the first time, emotion wasn't just felt, it was understood. A touching image, a small group sits in silence after a loss. One person finally whispers a word, perhaps a sound that means gone. The others repeat it softly like an echo. That repetition turns grief into communion. A single sound transforms sorrow into solidarity. Language even then was medicine. Yet language also brought introspection, the double-edged gift of self-awareness. Once humans could speak of emotions, they could overthink them. Anxiety, guilt, nostalgia. These are children of the talking mind. As soon as we could name our fears, we began to wrestle with them. The same words that comforted us also haunted us. Scientists are still debating whether language made humans happier or merely more complex. But few would deny it made us human. Let's picture a quiet moment before dawn. The camp sleeps. A lone woman sits by the fading fire, tracing patterns in ash. She hums softly, forming sounds that might mean nothing to others but everything to her, fragments of thoughts, memories, dreams. The hum becomes a whisper. The whisper becomes a word. For the first time in the history of life, a creature speaks not to survive but simply to think. That single act, talking to oneself, marks the dawn of consciousness as we know it. The mind has learned to listen to its own voice. And so, from the first grunt to the first sentence, from survival cries to songs of wonder, language has transformed humanity inside and out. The air itself has become sacred, because within every breath now lives a thought, and within every thought a world. The whisper that began in the grasslands had become a roar of meaning. By now, language wasn't just a tool, a signal or a symbol. It was a bridge stretched across time itself. Every spoken word carried the weight of thousands of years of breath, thought, and memory. The age of silence was long gone. Humanity had learned to speak, and nothing would ever be the same. Across continents, tribes now lived in worlds built from sound. Words turned air into architecture, villages of meaning, cities of thought. With speech, people didn't just survive. They created. They told stories of origins and destinies, sang to their children, argued about justice, bargained for love, whispered to gods. The invisible became audible, the fleeting became eternal. Scientists are still debating how long it took for full modern language to emerge. Some say 2 million years. Others claim only 50,000. But the timescale hardly matters. What matters is that at some unknown moment, humans crossed a threshold that no other species ever has. The first true conversation took place, not a cry, not a warning, but an exchange of ideas. Imagine it a morning in an open valley, mist curling low over the grass. Two people sit beside a fire, planning the day. One says something that means, "We go east where sun comes," and the other nods, adding, "Take spears and skins." It's simple, but revolutionary. They are not reacting, they are reasoning. Sound has become logic. And from that moment on, humanity stopped merely living in nature and began shaping it. Speech turned thought into cooperation, cooperation into invention, and invention into civilization. The same voice that once whispered fear now spoke vision. What if we build here? What if we stay? Those questions birthed villages, then cities, then nations. With language came the ability to plan irrigation, coordinate hunts, share discoveries, record memories. Every innovation from the first wheel to the first poem began as a word. A funny thought: somewhere in that deep prehistory, someone probably invented the first complaint. Why my rock smaller than yours? And thus economics was born. But speech didn't just transform how humans worked, it transformed how they felt. The world became narratable. Love could now be confessed. Gratitude could be spoken. Anger could be voiced instead of acted out. Words turned emotion into art. The first song, perhaps, was a love call carried through dusk. The first poem, a thank you whispered to the moon. And with that, humanity began recording itself, not yet in stone or clay, but in memory and tradition. The storyteller became the first historian. Generations later, when writing finally emerged, it was only an extension of that original miracle, a way to make breath permanent. One quirky tidbit: anthropologists studying oral cultures find that a single storyteller can memorize up to 100,000 words, enough to preserve a people's entire history for centuries. The human mind became its own library, all because language had trained memory to sing. Now imagine the world on the brink of civilization. Tribes gather in larger groups, their dialects blending into shared tongues. New words emerge for abstract ideas: peace, justice, spirit, tomorrow. Humanity is learning to talk about things that don't exist yet, about things it hopes will exist. Language has become the architecture of the possible. Scientists are still debating whether speech gave rise to morality or the other way around. But it's clear that once humans could discuss right and wrong, kindness became teachable. The voice became conscience. Do not harm, share food, protect child. Spoken values turned instinct into ethics. And perhaps that was the greatest transformation of all. Language made us not only intelligent, but kind. Let's return one last time to that eternal fire. The clan sits together, their faces softly illuminated. The children listen to an elder whose voice trembles with age, but carries power still. He tells of the first people, of the first voice that broke the world's silence. His listeners know the story by heart, but they lean closer anyway. The rhythm soothes them. The familiarity binds them. Outside, the night hums with life, yet the only sound that matters is human speech. For in that circle, words are not merely sound, they are shelter. As the story ends, quiet falls. The elder looks at the youngest child and smiles, gesturing toward the stars. A soft voice repeats the final line, mispronouncing it slightly. The elder laughs. Everyone does. The sound ripples through the dark like a heartbeat of light. And in that laughter, that effortless exchange of sound and soul, lies the miracle of being human. Now as you lie there, breathe softly. Let your chest rise and fall, like the ancient rhythm of those who came before you. Picture the first humans gazing at the same moon. You see tonight their fires glowing like stars on the earth below. Hear their voices low, melodic, full of awe. They speak not in words you know, but in feelings you still understand, safety, love, belonging. Each exhale carries a fragment of their story. Every sigh of wind outside your window is a whisper of that first conversation, the one that taught our species how to connect. We are all descendants of those murmurs of the courage it took to speak into the dark. The next time you talk to someone, a friend, a child, even yourself, remember that you're participating in the oldest ritual on earth. The simple act of saying hello, or I understand, is a continuation of a miracle that began long before writing, before fire, before memory. You're speaking the language of every ancestor who ever dared to make a sound that meant something more than survival. And now, let the noise of the day fade away. Let words become whispers, then breath, then quiet. The story you've just heard doesn't end. It simply drifts forward through time, through you, through the gentle rhythm of your breathing. Somewhere across the great span of ages, that first human voice still echoes, not in the air, but in your heartbeat, in every thought you shape, in every dream that finds its way into silence. So close your eyes, traveler of language, and rest easy. You've carried the sound of humanity's beginning all the way to this night. Let it lull you to peace. Let it remind you that you are part of a story told not in words, but in warmth. Sweet dreams.